Welcome to Raising the Curve, a podcast designed to teach you everything you need to know to be better with your money. In the wise words of Amy Schumer, we're slipping carrots into the brownie recipe.
I don't really get the saying.
It's kind of like eating vegetables that actually taste good. You know, like putting
Still
carrot
not
in the
with
brownie
you.
recipe.
Are you on the script?
It's basically like saying investing in finance can be boring as but it totally doesn't need to be.
Okay. So we're making it fun by putting the carrot, aka the vegetables, which are good for you, into the brownie recipe.
Okay, we got there, okay.
Okay.
Wow, you've really got a finance brain.
Yeah, one of us has to.
This is true. Okay, come and learn alongside me from Vic Harris, ex-fund manager, where I'm going to ask all the questions that you wish you could.
And I'm going to be eating all the brownie you wish you could.
No, that's so not the joke, Vic.
Oh.
Okay, just come and talk and learn and laugh with us because together we really can raise the curve. We have someone in the studio who we need to give a lot of context as to why she's here, how she ended up being in studio with us. And this is something we've kind of breadcrumbed for a while, haven't we? Like the idea of what's going on behind the scenes at the Curve, with the business. It would have been maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, and we were both just drowning in work.
Yeah.
And I remember we had to, I randomly just jumped on, used my microphone. I was out in the country. We weren't even in London at the time. I think we'd just maybe moved. And we put out this 3-minute episode just being we're raising money. We're not doing an episode this week. We'll be back, you know.
We're drowning in investor meetings.
Yeah. And so basically what's been happening for the last few months? Well, actually, we've been thinking about it for a while. It's just that we knew we had to pause all business activity to be able to focus on it.
Because people were like, it's like a full-time job. And we were like, yeah, whatever, it's not that hard. And then we're like, oh gosh, yeah, okay, everyone was right. Yes, yeah.
So we basically decided at the start of this year, although we had thought about it for I don't know, maybe a year and a half, that we wanted to take external capital and investors to be involved in the Curve.
And what that effectively means is that they buy a part of the business and give you cash, and then you can go and spend that how you wish.
We put that clip out. We were talking to investors at the time. We were reaching out to people. But then what happened when we put that episode out, which we did not expect, was Business Desk being oh, cool, you're raising capital. Can we write an article? And people from the community were can we invest?
Yeah.
And it was unexpected and totally not the point of putting that out. But in hindsight, quite genius because someone who came through in our emails was someone who's sitting right next to us, Dani. I don't even know where to start. What did you think when you first heard that episode? And was that the way that you heard that we were looking for investors?
I actually saw that you were looking for investors on LinkedIn.
Ah, we did do a LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
Then also listened to the podcast. And as soon as I'd heard that, something was just ticking over in my brain. And I actually was thinking about it for a couple of weeks before we got in touch. Actually, the special guest is Miso.
Yeah.
And
so
I
just
am
for
the
context,
assistant.
no one can see this, but Miso is holding Dani's hand and licking her thumb right now.
And as soon as Dani stops, she's like, excuse me, and taps her on
Really part of the team.
Yeah.
So as soon as I saw that there was an opportunity, I thought about it, and it just kept coming back to the forefront of my mind again and again and again. Miso. Again and again and again. And it became something that just made sense. And I was in a point of my life where I was looking for what my next move was going to be. And so in terms of investing, I was searching for the next company that I wanted to sort of put money into and see grow.
I'm intrigued to know what made you think that the Curve was a good business to invest in.
Imagine
wanna,
she's
really
it was
back
actually
yourselves, guys.
100% Vic and not Sophie.
Just want to toot our own trumpets. Why did you think we were so good? No, but yeah.
Honestly, the potential for the market of women wanting to learn is so vast to me. Even with you guys being in business for 3-4 years, that you have, there's so many people I have conversations with on a day-to-day basis that have no awareness of financial literacy, no access to that kind of information. They're kind of awkward when they have the conversations. They really want to know more, and they're looking for a community just like the Curve. So it just was a no-brainer to me. Having lived in different countries throughout the world, I talk to different people from different countries all the time in my friendship groups, and they were always mentioning That's so cool. I'd love to be a part of something like that.
I think that's how I felt about the curve when we first talked about it, because I remember Vic mentioned it, and it was almost just this light bulb moment. It's sometimes when people bring out like a product and you're like, how has that never existed? You know, it's and I had the same feling. It was just, it's hard to explain. It was like, oh my gosh, like that's
it's
so
a no-brainer,
important.
of
And
course,
it's like, so I totally understand that. And I guess for people listening, so I guess just to sort of, I was about to say circle back, just to go back to the idea of investors. So we have how many total is it, Vic?
10.
We have 10 investors now. So we've officially like closed the round, which is like investor chat that we sort of learned very much on the job, didn't we? It was like the amount of lingo. It was like a very steep learning curve for us because we've obviously never done that before. But Dani, spoiler, one of the investors in the curve. And basically what happened was we spoke to Dani. We were like, oh my gosh, she was the managing partner of a really amazing, digital agency in New Zealand. We'd met her before. Wow, what a compliment. And also so great because being a digital business and neither of us are like overly digital savvy.
And it's such an area we struggled with. And so I remember having the conversation with you and you were like, no, I'd be interested.
We both had this light bulb moment, Vic and I, where we were like, hold on a second. What are you doing for work?
I remember that call. It turned into something really different really quickly.
I didn't even talk to Vic, I think,
we went
before
for
saying it.
an investor chat and then you're halfway through, we were both like,
hold on.
And I was like, looked at you like, go for it.
Yeah. We didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
It just sort of happened. And I think, I guess just for anyone that's got like 5 emails from us in one go or like seen some
Dani,
shitty
it's not
ads.
us. Yeah.
No, I was about to say before Dani, like I hate to think what some of our digital, we don't know digital strategy. We'd like throw a few dollars behind random ads and we'd get messages from people being like, hey, just so you know, you've spammed me 25 times today. And we're like, sorry.
Or just that this hasn't been updated and it's still saying like 2022 or something. I was like, oh gosh.
But also just, I guess, firstly, apologies for any of that, but thank you for sticking with us and not like being like, God, these girls are useless. But that was kind of, I guess, the main thing for us where we're like, how amazing to have someone that knows the space really well. Could we maybe just before we continue, Vic, explain the key differences between, because a lot of people refer to investing in companies as angel investing, which you may or may not have heard of. The idea of that is investing in private companies, so ones you can't find on the stock exchange.
Yep.
And then what we talk about all the time on the curve is investing in the stock market, public companies. So I guess maybe just for people listening, can we just differentiate, because there was 10 people who invested in the curve, but they're very different people and at a very different financial stage than what most people listening would be at. And I think it's important to like differentiate because I didn't know what this was until recently.
I guess with investing in companies that are public, so that's companies that are on the stock exchange, it's what we talk about a lot. Companies like Visa, MasterCard, Uber, like all of that, they're all public companies. So you can literally go onto a trading platform, type them in, buy the shares, and then you become a shareholder. Very easy. You can also sell your shares very easily. So if you're like, oops, I actually invested too much, or I've reached my goal now and I want to sell my stock, you can do it literally with a push of a button. It's very what we call liquid. So there's lots of people buying and selling those shares, making it easy to transact. With investing in private companies, they're not part of an exchange. They're not listed on an exchange. They don't attend the market. When we talk about the farmer's market, they're not at the farmer's market. So it's a bit more difficult.
Explain the farmer's market analogy for anyone who has not heard that episode. People be like, what?
They're like, what? So a stock exchange is like a farmer's market where it's like a centralized place where everyone goes to buy and sell shares. So the companies go, they have stalls selling apples and oranges, for example, and that's like the companies, and then you have all the investors that go and they buy and sell the stocks. The stocks,
and
which
the
is
reason,
like the product.
the reason that we use the farmer's market analogy is the idea that there's lots of different types of companies with lots of different industries selling different services, technology, blah, blah, blah. So if you were to go to a farmer's market, there's lots of different products. There's heaps of different fruit and vegetables. There's cheeses, there's bread. The idea of going...
It's like an auction house as well, like you would go there, you've got all the art, cars, whatever you're buying, and you've got all the people there bidding. Like that's effectively what a stock exchange is. It's kind of like that. And so with private companies, they don't belong to a stock exchange. They're not listed, they're not public, means that their financials aren't open to the public and all of that. So they're it's a bit more tricky to invest in them.
And do you think tricky is for many reasons? The fact that firstly, it's really hard to even find out about opportunities for private companies.
Yep.
Like I think up until recently, I wasn't really even aware of how those conversations happened.
Yeah.
And now I think that we've gone through the process. I've heard lots of other people talking about companies, and I'm like, I know, Dani, you were speaking about one not that long ago, but it was like within the lingerie space. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And I looked it up and I was like, oh, I'd invest in that. I mean, obviously that was just at first glance, but it is definitely more of a, not elitist, but it's not a publicized opportunity.
And that's why when we had so many investor meetings is because we have to go out, find those people, talk to them and sell our business. Whereas if we're on a stock exchange, you're just on there and people effectively come to you, or, you know, there's not that actively going out and finding those investors from a company point of view, and there's not investors having to go and actively find those companies if you're public. So you kind of have to do a lot of the hustle.
And what about the risk profile, which is like the idea of how risky is the investment? Because the stock market, there's regulation, there's all sorts of like, I guess like they're under the microscope from a legal perspective. Differently with a private company, how would you compare how risky it would be?
That's one side of it, yes. There's rules and regulations that you have to abide by if you're a public company on a stock exchange. There's two other things as well which make investing privately more risky, and that is that usually it's smaller, younger companies, so they don't have that track record yet. You know, if you're investing in the likes of Amazon or Adobe, for example, those companies have been around for a very, very long time. They're now big enough to be on a stock exchange. Whereas companies like The Curve, only been around a couple of years. We haven't had that track record of revenue growth, profit growth, or, you know, been through economic cycles, all of that. So there's that part of it. There's also the other part is the liquidity, which was kind of what I was talking about before, is that if shit hits the fan, it's very hard. You can't just press sell and sell your shares and get out. You have to go and actively find someone to buy your shares.
Do you know, it's so interesting that you use that as an example, because just yesterday, I can't remember what the company was. Oh, it was my flatmate's company. They're not public, so it's a private company. They've got like 350 employees, and the CEO and the founder left recently. They've now got a new founder. And so in terms of raising when you're a private company, there's like pre-seed, seed, series A, B, C, like it's honestly, it's a whole nother language. But he was saying they're like, you know, they've raised maybe like 15 times, blah, blah, blah. And I was saying to him, I was like, why? Because they were saying this is the first time they've raised where the company, it wasn't like a positive raise. They weren't raising at a time where the business had increased in value. And I was like putting my little hat on with all of Vic's knowledge, but like, well, did the CEO leave and sell all their shares? And he was like, no, because like, who would he sell them to? You know, and I just had that moment where I was like, oh, of course, because
like if the Curve starts doing shit and we're the biggest shareholders,
you can't go and be like, hey, do you want to buy my shares?
Hey, do you want to buy my shit company?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my God, can we touch some wood?
Sorry. But then on the flip side of that is that we're the largest shareholders. So if the Curve does fantastically well, we benefit from that. And that's the risk, is that it could go either way. And that's the risk that Dani's taken, is that I'm going to invest in you guys because I think you guys are killing it and you're amazing.
So
He's putting words in her mouth. That's what you said, yeah.
And incredible market potential, but sure. It's all personality based.
Vic's feeling like she needs a bit of, I think, affirmation.
Love your work, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, well, I guess
so it's like she's investing in it because she thinks she's going to get her investment is going to grow and grow and grow. But this is coming back to this liquidity thing, is that like you kind of are forced to take a long-term view if you're investing in private companies, because Dani can't invest and then be like, actually, I really want to buy a car. Can I get that money out again tomorrow? And it's like, no. Like you have to now wait until we do another capital raise.
Don't freak her out. I'm like,
I know.
Due diligence has been done.
Yeah.
Guys. But also it's worth noting that if I wanted to in 3 or 4 years' time, even if that was an option, you'd have to approve the person that sold that bought those shares from me.
You can't sell to a competitor.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, actually, I've got this person over here that runs a financial female platform that wants to buy my shares. Yes. So that is the difference. So there's kind of 3 types of investors that invest in private companies. It's angel investors. So these are individuals with lots of money. There is venture capital, which is VC funds. They invest in early stage companies. So companies that it might be an idea even. They might not even have a product or any revenue. And then there's...
Can I say something on that, which I thought was so interesting? Because you know how like Vic always says, invest in what you know, invest in what you like, all of that stuff. When we started going through this process and we did talk to a few venture capital funds, it's exactly the same. Like VC funds will invest in either
Niches.
deep tech or, you know, like they have their niches. And it's exactly the same concept as being an everyday investor, except it's a company version where you have to fit a certain niche. Otherwise they're like, well, we don't know your business, so we're not going to bother.
Well, also for them, they have to focus on something. There's so many startups and so many new companies. It's like, okay, we're going to focus on consumer tech and we're going to know that industry and what moves that industry and what businesses are good and what ones are bad, and like so that we can pick the best ones. Do you know what I mean? Like if you spread yourself too thin, you don't end up knowing anything about anything. And then private equity was the last one. They invest more later stage. So they usually invest just before a company goes public. So they're investing in established companies, but they're not public yet, if that makes sense. And in terms of amounts that those 3 types of investors would invest, it's like angel is usually smaller.
Under 100K generally, right?
No, like under $1 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or even like 5 million. It depends on how wealthy the person is. And then, venture capital could be anything from, 500,000 to 10 million, and then private equity is like bigger, much bigger than that. So, but then there's private equity companies that invest little amounts. So it totally depends.
Private equity is like, I feel as though I've met so many guys or friends whose boyfriends are in private equity, you know, and I've never really understood what it was. Like, I'm in PE. I'm like,
well, you know that equity is capital, it's money, it's cash, it's shares. Like that's what equity means. So private equity. It's like saying you could just go back to and be like, I invest in public equity.
Love that.
Yeah.
Real
big dick energy.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm in private equity. And you're like, oh, well, I invest in public equity.
So Dani, back to you. Sorry, I feel like we've just hijacked this entire. I guess in terms of like now, just for context, what she's doing. So Dani has lived in like many places, which we'll get to in a second, but was living in New Zealand and has now relocated over here, which we love. It's so exciting. Yeah. And she's our commercial director, which is just honestly such a relief because I was just flailing around in the wind trying to do sponsorships. And
we had a strategy day last week and I came out of that and I was like, gosh, if Soph and I did that, we would go on so many tangents.
Oh, yeah.
Like we definitely did during the day. And Dani's like, right, guys, focus.
Yeah, she's like, back to it, everyone. We're like, oh,
and by the end, we're just like,
yeah, we did get
like
really
two
giggly.
kids that are just over it. Like,
by about 3 p.m, I was like, I've lost them. I've lost them. Wrap it up.
But like, so I guess anyone listening, whether you work at a corporate, like one of the things that we're going to be focusing on in the next year or two is the Curve Classroom is something that we just have realised there's so much opportunity for massive companies that want to invest in particularly their female staff, but I guess honestly it could be any gender, on upskilling when it comes to financial literacy. So if you either like work in a big company or you want to like actually get access to that, let us know because we can put Dani in touch with wherever you work. But to have someone that actually knows what they're up to, that's going to now be Dani. So just in case anyone's listening and they're like, oh, stunning news.
And all those brands that want to like reach out because they didn't like dealing with Soph.
Yeah, you won't get an out of office saying I'll be back to you in 2 to 4 weeks.
Oh, poor little Soph. She was trying so hard.
No, she was. She was juggling a lot of balls.
Did an amazing job.
We're so happy to have you. It's honestly such a relief.
Yeah.
What other things do you have in your portfolio and how did you get yourself to a place financially where you'd invested in other assets before you went to like angel investing or private company investing?
So in terms of what's in my portfolio, I mainly invest in ETFs. So I have got about 30% of my portfolio is in the S&P 500. Another 30% of my portfolio is in the NASDAQ 100.
And that's the top 100 companies on the NASDAQ.
Because you can also invest in the broader aspect of the NASDAQ. So you could just put it in to, I think Fidelity's got a really broad fund that you can invest
But
in.
why would you?
So there's the New York Stock Exchange and there's the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, two major stock exchanges in the US. The S&P 500 is a combination of companies
From both.
The NASDAQ 100 is the top 100 companies purely on the NASDAQ.
Why would you bother investing in more than that?
Because it diversifies the risk. So it's broader. You're just putting into, 5,000, 10,000 companies instead of that top 100.
Okay.
Also, because if you're investing in the S&P 500, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Vic, but a lot of the stocks are in the S&P 500 as well.
From the NASDAQ, you mean?
Sorry, if you're investing in the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
Sorry. So if you're investing in the NASDAQ 100, a lot of those will be in the S&P 500.
Like Apple and such.
So it's a good way if you want to double down on like more growthy tech, high returning companies. That's usually what the NASDAQ stock exchange is about. So you've gone, right, I'm going to invest broadly in the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in the US. You're like, but I want a bit more growth, a bit more of the kind of high growth tech companies that are in the S&P 500. So I'm going to invest in the NASDAQ as well.
But I don't want to invest in them individually in terms of stocks.
Okay, cool.
And then I've got a couple of individual stocks that I've held for a while. Spotify is one of them.
Oh, love that.
Yes.
I also invest in AMD.
What is that?
Semiconductors, like chips.
AMD.
Not doing very well at the moment, guys.
It hasn't recently, but it has over the long term.
And a couple of others as well in the portfolio as well.
Yeah, cool.
Nice.
And then do you generally invest in lots of different private companies, or do you kind of do a larger amount on fewer? Like what would be your...
Yeah, so I would generally only have an investment in one private company at a time. So when I was invested in the last company, I had put a significant amount of money into that. And as it's worked out with the curve as well, a very kind of active investor in that sense.
It's quite a good way to do it, I think. It's like, I'm not just going to invest and then
real
go about my
Taipei.
day and kind of forget about it. You're like, I'm going to invest and join the company so that I'm a master of my own destiny.
Well, it's
really.
backing yourself, it's going, I believe in my abilities to help create what I think can happen with this company. So I'm going to double down on this.
With your last company that you invested in, the private one, what did you get a good return on that by the time you left?
Yes, I got over 100% return.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you very much.
Let's aim for 200%.
Wow.
With
Oh
this
my
company.
God, that's incredible, Dani.
Yeah, that is amazing.
God, that's cool. No pressure, Vic.
But that's not.
I know.
That's not a sum of just my efforts. You know what I mean? I
No,
had
but you were...
an incredible team, an incredible strategy that was, made by people within the business. It is a sum of all parts. It's not
of
just
course it is.
not just me.
No, but
if the
still.
curve does what we know it can do, I'm not at the end going to go, oh, nailed it.
No, but I think you're right. It's definitely a combination of efforts. But I think to be able to spot a private company that you believe in, to then be able to know you can put your efforts and skills towards that and be a part of that growth story. Like what a satisfying way to invest, where it's not just set and forget. It's not just in the S&P 500. Like you're doing that as well.
Yeah.
But I think there's something kind of like, it's a different type of gratification when you see the return.
And I think we need to also understand that there's that kind of time of the market as well. Not timing the market, but the moment that investment was made was just a really good time in market, and it worked out for the best. It is unrealistic to expect any of my future investments to achieve that within that time frame.
There's also the element of like, if this isn't doing well, okay, what can I do to get in there and make it do well?
100%.
You can't do that with Apple. You can't buy shares in Apple and then be like, hang on, your share price is going down. I need to get in there and help.
Yeah.
You can't put your own effort in to change the direction of a lot of companies because they're too big or you're too much of a small shareholder. Whereas for you, it's like, okay, if we're missing targets, it's like, okay, I need to hustle. And you can kind of have a bit more input in the return of your investment. Yeah.
Yeah. And that really suits my personality as well, because I do like to be super involved in stuff. And you guys have noticed that I'm not exactly chill.
None of us are. It's so fun.
It's like radio silence.
Yeah.
Can relate.
Okay.
Like I don't think anyone would describe any of us as chill.
No.
You actually, Vic, in a personal sense,
Very
come
chill.
across as chill.
Yeah.
But they don't know what's going on.
But they don't work with me.
Yeah. I think if we were able to tap into your head, we would see a really different thing going on than what you present.
Yes. So Dani is our first proper employee. She's our commercial director. For anyone who wants anything to do with you know.
Literally anything to do with the curve.
Yeah, actually, we're just taking a
Just
full
come
on
to me.
sabbatical.
Come to me.
No, but seriously, any brands that want to work with us, or if you want us to do any kind of like corporate education, that kind of thing, is all a Dani conversation. But I guess with that in mind, because a lot of people will start to like speak to you and be talking to you, and I think that's what's really nice when we work with brands or people or companies, is that we're not dealing with another huge agency, like it's us.
Yeah.
So for the sake of them knowing who you are and introducing your money story and how you grew up, we wanted to have a conversation about, like where you came from. And actually, we were just saying before we recorded, these are conversations we haven't even had with you. So I'm excited to like get to know a bit more
I'm
about
excited.
Dani.
And this is like a vetting process for any employees of the curve. They have to come on the podcast and divulge their money.
I love this vetting
money
process
behaviours.
after you've signed
Yeah,
and moved.
Did you not read the fine print? Oh, that sucks.
Love it.
So where did you grow up? What was your like family dynamic when you were younger? Like where are you from? Because even your accent is hard to decipher.
My accent is the airport accent, you know. I have lived in too many countries and picked up inflections in all of them. So I've got this strange, soft English accent that sounds like Australian, but I am very much British. And I was born in Bristol and moved 14, 15 years ago to Australia for the first time. So
Ages. So you've been in the Southern Hemisphere for like probably the same amount of time you have on this side of the world.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair to say. I think there's been a couple of moves back and forth, which I'm sure we'll go into, but upbringing was all Bristol based. And
Do you feel at home here? Like when you landed, were you like,
this is going to sound a bit sad, but I don't really ever feel home anywhere. I think, oh God, this is going to sound very,
No.
woo, but I just feel at home wherever I am.
No,
Yeah,
that is like
yeah.
the most beautiful
Yeah.
thing ever.
Because I think as long as I'm feeling good and have made the right decision or move for whatever it is that I'm passionate about, most of the moves I've done have either been based on relationships or work. And as long as I'm connected and committed to what I'm doing, it feels like home and it feels like the right thing.
It's how it should be. And also home within yourself. It's not a destination. It's how you feel.
Yeah.
It's the people that you're surrounded by.
Yeah.
Like,
And
really.
I do think I'm in probably the best personal place I've been in my life, in terms of feeling good, feeling balanced, empowered, confident, and enjoying all the moves that I've made in my life. I think I'm in a good spot. So yes, I do feel at home, thanks to the curve.
I know, I'm like, no pressure. This new office has to be like real homely vibes.
Yeah. We put a little bed in the
haven't signed
corner in
off
case
yet.
anyone wants to stay the night. So do you think, I mean, because we had like a little team dinner not that long ago, and we started talking about your childhood and how you grew up. And I mean, I wondered if you would be open to speaking about that at all, and you can choose to what extent. And then I guess the second question to that would be, do you think that your ability to create home for yourself wherever you are maybe stemmed from the way you grew up?
100%, but I did not put that together until that second. So thank you for saving me thousands of dollars from future therapy. Well, I think anyone that knows me knows that I'm a natural oversharer, so no problem going into childhood memories.
Great for a podcast.
So good for a podcast. Family dynamic was quite strained and fractured, but in terms of money, a really gloomy cloud on that subject for my whole childhood. And I've spoken to my sister on this, and she has a similar experience, which is just validating to know that it wasn't just me and that she has the same memories, because you know how sometimes siblings can just have a completely different memory of your childhood.
Or experience all together, yeah.
And although we had individual experiences, we definitely have common threads. And shame around money is a really big one from my childhood, and self-worth being tied into money. So to explain that a little bit more, we never had any financial chats. There was no pocket money situation. It was very much, we all started earning at a really young age, younger than anyone I know.
As in you got your first job?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are related to family, you know, some of them are, you know, aunties paying you for Saturday jobs and stuff like that. But most people would have done that aged 13, 14, 15. I had my first job at 8.
Whoa.
So, and that's...
What were you doing?
My auntie had a car boot stall. So not just like those random Saturday ones, but a professional one where she would, I think kind of illegally, import pots and pans and sell them out of literally the back of a van.
Oh my gosh, and you were her little assistant.
We would wake up at 3 a.m. on Saturday mornings and drive to a car boot in Taunton, which is kind of near Bristol, And we would be there from 3 a.m. till 2 p.m. and I would get £5 at the end of the day. And my job was to build all of the displays and stuff. So I would take the pots and pans out of the boxes and display them and then put the price stickers and everything.
Oh my God.
It's pretty amazing at 8, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I even knew how to like make my bed at 8. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we were all relatively independent just because of the family dynamic kind of had to be. But in terms of money education, there was, none of it.
Do you remember what you did with those? Like, if you were earning £5 on a Saturday, what did you hide it in your room? Like, where did it go?
So that's a lot of my sort of scarcity mindset, which was my money mindset for a very, very long time. I would even say up until last year. I think I only really broke through the scarcity mindset last year. But up until then, at those times I would come home and I would hide it. I did the same thing with everything though. Like in terms of Easter eggs, I would get an Easter egg and I would eat like a tiny piece a day for like 3 months. So that long-term investing thing has always worked really well.
And was it, do you think, because
I was
you
the complete opposite. I would eat all the eggs.
I actually used to hide them and they would go off as like to the point where like
because
That
you forgot
in
about them.
itself is
No.
such a like personality.
It is a
I would put them in the fridge and like honestly they'd be there for a year. Do you think, did that come back to when you say like the scarcity mindset and hiding things and taking little bits at a time? Is that because there was your family in a financial sense didn't have abundance and therefore it was like you kind of had to like take bits where you can? Like, have you reflected on how that was impacting you?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because it's hard to know when you're a child what's really going on behind the scenes in terms of financial wealth and wellness within the family. But we never wanted for anything material, which is what's interesting because there would be an abundance of, croissants on a Saturday morning. There was, all of the top brand stuff in the fridge. My mum was wearing the designer clothes and such like that. So on the surface, there was no problem, but there's a roof that's having carrier bags, like plastic bags, shoved into it when it leaks. There is also a real big feeling throughout my whole childhood of don't ask for anything. So necessity being a real problem for my parents. And I recall, asking for really basic needs and then being met with anger, frustration, and you were an inconvenience for needing something, particularly anything to do with money. So I think from there I learned that I had to earn my own in order to not be a nuisance. And if
So you felt like a burden, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. And in order to get where I needed to be, no one's coming. It's just you. So, I mean, my earliest money memory is of me, even though I was earning those £5 and stuff like that, I didn't really consider that a money memory. It's just sort of transactional to me. But my first money memory is of my mum and dad had split up by this point. I think I was 11, and she would ask me to get him to pay for things, but he was they would communicate only through me. They wouldn't communicate with each other, which, anyone that's from a divorce home, which is so many people, that they've probably gone through something similar, but this was quite nasty. And she would set me almost goals. Go and get this from your dad. But then if you came home without that money, you had failed. So I started to tie my self-worth into achieving things like that. But my father was incredibly tight with money. Honestly, if you asked for £1, it would be explain why, like, no, I can't give that to you. We don't have anything. But it's like you're driving a brand new car, but nothing for the kids. So the first money memory is my mum asking me to get my dad to pay for a school trip, which was actually a mandatory school trip that had to be paid for, which is a problem in itself because it's just giving an opportunity for a child that can't afford it to look humiliated and singled out. But I went to my dad and asked him and he said no. And my mum said she wouldn't pay for it. So I was left in the situation of how am I going to achieve this? So I got given £2 a day, which was very fortunate. And I'm really grateful that I had £2 a day for dinner money, for lunch money.
Wait, hold on. You had to pay for your own dinner and lunch?
I got given £2 a day from my mum. to pay for lunch at school. That's kind of how it works in the UK.
Okay.
It's changed a bit now. There's paid school dinner systems, but I don't have children, so I'm not like across the way it works these days. But back then it was like £5 or £6 a week sort of thing. So I would get given £1.50 or £2 a day to go and pay for my lunch at school. And I ended up just not eating for like 3 weeks at school, but like at any point in the day, and saving up that money. And then I went to my dad.
How old were you?
11.
Even just having the foresight of like, this is the only money I'm going to have and I need to ration this. And the way to do that is to not eat is just like the fact that I'm almost
actually really heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I'm almost more fucked off at the school for like making it a mandatory school trip, making kids starve themselves so they can afford. It's just
I mean, they would have no idea what was going on behind the scenes.
But that's the point. They should they're educators and they're seeing you every day.
I think there's so many problems. With that, though. It's like
it's also the parents. There's like the family, the school that
they would only accept checks, not coins, right? So I went to my dad with this bag of coins. And I said, you said no for this school trip and I know that you wouldn't give me the money, but I have to go and mum like is disappointed in me because I don't have this money from you. So I've saved this up from my dinner money. And he took the bag of coins from me, wrote me a check and kept it. And that's my first money memory.
Wait, he didn't give you a check?
He gave me the check, but he took the coins. He didn't do that thing that you're expecting from the parents to be like, I can't believe this has happened. Oh my goodness, let me write you the check, keep the, you know.
He can't, it's not like I'm sorry I made you starve yourself.
Yeah,
keep the money.
Yeah. He just wrote me a check and I went on the trip. So that was also me experiencing for the first time control in money. Okay, I was able to get the result I wanted by controlling and restricting what I spent, and that went into the rest of my life.
It makes so much sense when you look at it in that way, where it's like, okay, well, also I would say from a career perspective, knowing how successful you've been and how many things that you have achieved, it's because you've probably had to apply that same tenacity and drive to be like, well, if I want this, I have to work for it. And so how am I going to make it happen?
Yeah, and that independence and that like there's no one else looking out for me or providing for me. If I want to achieve these things, I have to figure out how to do it myself. I think realizing that at the age of 11 is just like,
well, I came home and I presented the check to my mum and she was like, good girl. So there's so many problems with this whole scenario. It's like you get praised for achieving that, which then feeds into, I don't know, every job and every relationship dynamic that you have problems with in the future. But yeah, that's the money memory.
Was money ever spoken about with your siblings in terms of like conversations about, okay, we're all in this together, how do we help each other out, or like...
You mean aside from the parents?
Yeah, just in terms of amongst your siblings, that you all were probably living under the same roof at some point, and just like in terms of...
No, it was never really spoken about. I wasn't really particularly close to my middle sister, but my elder sister is 8 years older than me. So she always kind of had a bit of a caregiving role. But she left home very, very young as well. So by the time I was 8, she was gone. And it was very...
That's young.
Yeah, it was very much a figure it out for yourself.
Okay, so you kind of, in a way, like the person who probably was looking out for you...
Oh, yeah.
...was kind of gone.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's from an outsider's perspective, that would be really complex because we had a house that was paid for by my mother, all of these things. But I think in terms of well-being, it was definitely my older sister sort of keeping an eye out for us.
Did she keep an eye out for you when she left home, or like how did that work?
I remember my mum went on holiday at one point and left. I don't know what age I was, so I don't want to say an age, but I think it was quite young still. I think it was maybe 9, 10. It couldn't have been older than that because I wasn't in secondary school yet. And my sister had already left home and she came home to wash her hair because she was going for a job interview at like 16. Classic. And she went to use the water and it had been shut off. And she was like, why is there no water here? And I remember being like, I don't know. She's like, where's mum? And I was like, I'm not sure. But she left like £50 on the tables and she'll be back in a couple of days. She'd gone on holiday and left me and my sister.
She went on holiday with no running water in the house.
Well, I suppose she hadn't paid the bill and it got cut off while she was away. But this is before mobile phones and stuff as well, right? So there was not really any way to contact her. So I remember there being money on the table and a note next to it. And I'm sure that she'd said where she was going. But all I remember thinking was, I'm very young to not have anyone here. And my middle sister was there. So but her and I didn't have the greatest relationship. So it was sort of just, you know, fend for yourself. My elder sister came home and went to use the water, wash her hair. Then, and I believe she ended up calling the company and paying the bill to get the water turned back on and such. And
16 to have to do that.
So that's sort of the running theme was just sort of problem solve.
Yeah. There was no responsibility taken by the people around you. It was like, if you want to fix something, you need to make it happen.
Absolutely.
You ended up leaving home also reasonably young. Yeah. What was the deciding factor for you where you were like, okay, I think I'm going to be better in my own space, in my own situation, taking care of myself?
It's actually money driven. There was a conversation between my mother and me, and she wanted me to do something in school that was going to mean that my dad had to pay more maintenance, but it would mean me doing a lot of extra schooling. And so in the UK, there's child support, and it just depends on sort of the certain levels of education and the age of the child, depending on for how long that person needs to contribute towards those maintenance payments. And it was coming up for cutoff. And she said, well, we need that money, so you need to do those extra things. And I said, I'm not going to do basically work for that money to come from my father, because I don't think that's fair. And
were you just like, oh, I could work and get that money myself and keep it? Was that kind of the mindset?
I mean, it was more so, why are you using me as
a pawn?
Yeah. Why are you using me as a way to achieve money, rather than going, how will we make this work without putting her in the middle of this? Using me as And I remember saying, I'm not going to do that. And my mum said, okay, well, you know, you can leave then. And so next day I left. And I found a place to live on Gumtree.com, which is like Trade Me.
And how did you support yourself financially at that age?
So I worked,
And that paid for rent and living.
And it did sacrifice my education a little bit, because, you know, I had focuses that other people didn't at my age group. But, you know, it's all worked out in the end. I almost don't regret that, because it gave me a work ethic that I've been able to apply to so many aspects of my life. It doesn't necessarily mean it was healthy, but it did give me a structure that has financially benefited me in the long run, and has set me up for understanding money, being able to sort of give insight and assistance to friends, which is a big thing for me in money. A lot of my emergency fund is not for me. I have my own emergency fund, but I have an emergency fund for people who need things.
And I think that stems back to probably not having that when you were younger, not having anyone that you felt like loves you enough to help financially.
And also not wanting anyone else to get in a situation like that.
It's how could you not help if you're financially able to? I just am so perplexed by that. And that's a much bigger conversation. But even people I've only known for a matter of weeks, if I can see that they're in need of something like that, I just don't know how I would morally say no to someone if I knew that was in my bank. So, I mean, something that I've worked on for a long time was wanting to be there to support my friends if they needed it. And obviously I'm not going to give $5,000 to the first person I meet who's like, but somebody that's in a real bind and there's a month in between this. They just need that crossover period. They need a loan. You know, I've created contracts with friends before where I've said, no worries, I'll give you this, obviously no interest, but it's going to get them that house. It's going to get them that rental agreement, you know? And I think that a big thing for me is, just being able to provide that help and having enough in the bank to do that.
I guess just thinking back to like when you started looking for your own home, I'm also, I mean, I guess for anyone living in like New Zealand New Zealand or Australia, it's similar to like, I guess, the spare room in the UK, or like, you know, Trade Me rentals in New Zealand.
What is Gumtree?
Gumtree is kind of the equivalent.
I mean, I don't know anymore, but back in the day.
It's like Facebook Marketplace.
But I'm more just thinking like, you know, if I put a room up there, because generally people who are flatting in university, you were a lot younger. Did you have to say, I'm 16? Did they ask you?
I paid £140 a month. I remember that. And it was totally illegal because it was a room that had been divided by one of those mini stud walls that are not approved in any regulation or code. And it had a single bed in it. And that was pretty much all I could fit in. It was like a single bed and a wardrobe, which I had nothing to put in. So
You're like, cool, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah.
the wardrobe.
But it was just the best.
It's probably perfect for what you needed
it
at
was
that time.
amazing.
Though,
I felt
as
so
financially
empowered.
too. Wow, isn't that so interesting? Because and this is coming from such a privileged place, but when I heard you describe that, I just thought, God, I just want to cuddle 16-year-old Dani and be like, come live with me,
Yeah.
But actually the fact that your experience in that situation, the fact that you could pay for your own space and you were looking after yourself, you felt so empowered by that.
Yeah, I did. And that kind of created the rhythm of how I've lived my life in that sense, and probably why I've ended up in relationships where I am always the breadwinner. I think there's an element where I actually seek that out. If I'm being completely honest, I think that I like having that security and control over the situation. So
Makes so much sense.
yeah, it does.
I also think there's an element of, and I know you were 16, but I think there's an element of anyone leaving home, even if it's in a privileged situation or not so privileged situation, I think is just you learn so much about being independent, even just paying bills, earning your own money, like all of that kind of stuff. Like I
Groceries?
Yeah.
That was a mind blow for me.
Yeah. And I think just like fending for yourself a bit more. I think there's a lot of people that don't, and well, particularly amongst our friends that haven't moved out of home or have moved out of home very, very late. And you notice it like immensely, just like the lack of awareness when it comes to money, expenses, bills, paying rent, all of those things that are that you have to get up to speed with at some point in life. Is just like
you can sit there and be like, why wasn't I taught taxes at school? But it's like, well, also, let's just take a step back.
Yeah.
Everything costs money and you never had to consider that.
Yeah,
Like in a way,
yeah.
you got like the school of life a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I hope this doesn't sound like insensitive, but in a way has actually probably been the biggest blessing because you learnt those things so
100%.
much
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
Like financially, if we look at the situation that you're in now and the situation that I'm in now, you're so much more financially secure and able to take care of yourself. Like I still, if I was in a total bind, probably would call my dad or my mum and be like, help me. Whereas that in itself is a privilege I'm completely unaware of, like having a safety net should all go wrong. And I guess there's probably just the awareness of actually having to be an adult has maybe in a way been positive for you in a financial stability standpoint because it has been you from the beginning. Whereas even now at 32, am I an adult? Probably not really.
It's interesting though, because as soon as I get anxious or stressed, the very first thing I do is I restrict my money. It's the first thing I go back to is I open up the spreadsheet and I don't change anything because the spreadsheet's on lock. It's been the same for years. I know exactly what's going out. I know exactly what's coming in. I know what's going to my investments. I know what's in all of the funds. But there's something about I just need to make sure. I just need to make sure I have enough because what if something goes wrong?
why do you think that is? Is that a control thing? Is that a...
I think there's a few things. I think it's wanting to feel safe and looking at that amount and going like, you're fine. No one can take this from you. You're good. But also things have gone quite wrong quite a lot of the times in my life. And that's not a woe is me thing, but there's been moments where, you've got, there's a $10,000 visa bill to pay for. And I don't mean the credit card. I mean immigration. That stuff is non-refundable. And I've paid approximately 50,000 Australian dollars, so 25,000 pounds in visas in the last 10 years.
Gosh.
I wonder if we can step into because you just mentioned investments again, and I think my brain was kind of sitting in the personal finance, paying for rent space.
Yeah.
But actually, at what point in your life were you introduced to the idea of savings or investing to grow your money? Because I feel like if it had been me, probably I don't think I would ever have been able to move past the scarcity place. Mm-hmm. It's kind of risky investing in anything. And so I guess, how did you get introduced to that, and how did you feel brave enough to step into it when financial security and having that money to be able to use straight away is a sense of safety.
I think that scarcity and investing actually sat hand in hand for a while for me. When I was building up my very first, I would call it the emergency fund, the fuck you fund or whatever it is, it was control, but I was putting maybe, I think it was $80 a month at that point. I was 24, $80 a month into a high interest savings account. And that to me felt like investing, but saving at the same time.
But how did you know to do that? Like, who did anyone ever say, don't just leave this in your everyday account? Because like I think that's kind of what I mean. How did you have the foresight to know to even do that?
Curiosity and just the need to sort of go, how can I make this more? How can it not just be 80? How can it be 81? How can I also feel safe enough to have that money in scarcity, but also make it grow simultaneously? And I think that's a perfect thing for high yield savings accounts for people who want it there in case they need it, but
Want to grow it.
And they're not quite in the abundance mindset, but they really want to be.
It's so interesting though, because as I hear you talk, like it's almost as though, and I don't know, maybe this is kind of talking out of line, but you know, the patriarchy and the way that we've been taught to that, you know, whether it be the safety net of your parents or the safety net of getting married financially, like you really did have to figure it out and stand on your own 2 feet. And I wonder if it comes from a place of necessity, and maybe a lot of us have never actually ever been in that. You found out about high yield savings accounts because the responsibility was yours.
But you listen differently as well. When you don't have parents or guardians that are giving you instruction or advice, your ears are just open in a different way. Every business I worked in, I'd be listening to the CEOs. I was listening to bosses, and they were, you know, primarily male. And then when I got my first sort of female role model, which was one of my directors, my female directors, when I was working in Australia at the age of sort of 26. And I would just listen to things that she said. And because it was sort of in the property industry and building industry, I saw commission figures, I saw percentages, I was exposed to different things, and the curiosity and need for information from my childhood got applied to those situations. And I would go, how are they doing it? You know, and then I would research that. But it's because there was no one to call and ask. So you kind of take a piece of information that you hear and you run with it.
And in hindsight, you probably had a few more years on everyone in terms of career and work and learning by osmosis.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you, just Vic mentioning hindsight, when you look back at the way that you grew up with, you know, your parents sounding like they really just prioritized the things they wanted to spend money on and were not selfless enough to recognize when they needed to spend money on you and your sisters.
It's accurate.
Is there a part of you that is a little bit mad or like F you, or, you know, I'm just curious to know if that's...
Do you know what's interesting is that I can safely say that when I am their age, I will have more money than they've ever had. And it's funny how their unwillingness to give and to share and to teach will end them in a worse financial position than me, who wants to give and wants to teach and wants to share. So I think that's a lesson that can be applied in terms of mindset and positivity.
Wow.
But I think that you know, 8-year-old Danielle was kind of proud, but also a bit sad, you know, at the way that the journey had to happen. But we're feeling pretty good about where we ended up.
One of the things that you mentioned just then about like if things were reversed and if you had a relationship with your parents still and, you know, from a financial perspective, you actually could have helped them a lot more than what they would have given you had they properly parented. Sorry if that was brutal.
Not at all.
And I think that circular, like almost community mindset has been massively lost on a lot of us in the Western world. And, you know, as my parents start to get older and the reality of them not earning money forever, and, you know, it is kind of this like Benjamin Button cyclical thing where you do spend a lot of money on your kids when they're young, but you do hope that that's something that in your older years, if you needed to, there's the ability to like kind of work together.
And then you can rely on your kids because you've put a lot of time and effort for them to be successful financially. And
Yeah, I feel like it's just sad that you're naturally such a giving person who would have totally done that for your parents had they supported you.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, I was married as well. We just like to fit lots of things into short spaces.
I'm like, another episode.
I was saying when we were at dinner the other night, I was like, you're like an onion.
Yeah.
It's like, the more I hang out with you, I'm like, I peel back a layer and there's like, oh, I've actually been married. Oh, I've actually got 5 children. Yeah. She doesn't.
Yeah. But just even that relationship was really interesting to watch the dynamic of those parents and that person and what they knew about money and what they didn't. And that person was older than me and had a really strong relationship with both their parents and still had absolutely no idea. So when we were, trying to pay for that wedding and building those costs up, it was me teaching them about how we were going to budget, what we're going to spend money on, what's worth it, what's not, doing market research, getting an ABN, like an Australian business number, so that I could go into flower markets and buy them wholesale and create the bouquets myself, which you wouldn't be able to do as sort of a pedestrian. You needed a business number. So it's like, well, let's just get one, and just being able to have those conversations, whereas the other person would just turn to their parents and go, where should we get this?
It's almost like a reflection. I mean, I would never wish that childhood in terms of feelings alone and to having to really like fend for yourself on somebody, but I think hearing the way that you use that in a really positive light to learn and be curious and take responsibility for yourself is very unique. And I think it's just the thing that you're really lucky that that's how it affected you.
Totally.
Because I think there's a lot of people who would be in situations that are unsupportive in childhood and that's not how things end up. And it's just, how can you sort of take the bits that helped motivate you to take responsibility financially while, do you know what I mean? Like what's a good balance between the two? Because being coddled like I was did not work.
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that in order to step out of a scarcity mindset and into abundance, which like I said, only happened, honestly, last year's being generous, I think it was January this year, think I needed to zoom out from my life a bit, because when you're in it, and you're constantly like, I need more, that's not enough, I need more, the safety net needs to be bigger. You get really desensitized and it becomes really negative. Whereas I was able to stop everything and just zoom out and take some time off. I didn't work for a couple of months just because I needed to reset, which is an absolute privilege, but a privilege I created for myself.
100%.
So I don't like saying the word luck. There's nothing to do with luck in this. This was, how am I going to apply everything I'm learning to give myself a moment of respite and, regrouping? And I desperately needed it, and it's helped a lot. But zooming out on that sort of January, February, March I was able to go, this is enough. And applying everything I know about investing, why am I still so panicked? I know that this is going to grow. You've already got enough in there for it to grow. I could not contribute any more for the rest of my life and it will be okay. But you get caught up in this cycle of like, I have to put in more. And whilst continuous investing is important, not hampering your lifestyle and hampering your enjoyment of life is so important as well. And I had really gone way too far the other way. I was putting in 80% of my paycheck into my investments every month. 80%.
Whoa.
It's enormous.
Now, of course, I'm only able to do that because I was earning a good salary. But even when I was on lower salaries, it was the very first thing. It was like bills, rent, investment.
So amazing that you did that.
But now you're in such an incredible financial position. Yes, that probably wasn't the healthiest at the time, but now you're in such an incredible financial position that you can invest in lots of different things. Do you know what I mean? I think there's like every action has a reaction, and I think it's definitely.
I think that I remember a game-changing phrase that I read. I think it was just on the internet, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and it was like, no one saves their way to wealth. And I remember hearing that and going, what do you mean? And I just
I can do it.
That's where want to bet? And that's where the curiosity comes in.
Yeah.
Because then you go, well, what does that even mean? And when you even just type that into Google, you're gonna loads of investment stuff's gonna pop up, and then you research that further. So I think people just applying curiosity to finance is the very first step. You don't have to make any moves. Just read, just see.
Are there things you spend money on now that your younger self would just be like, what the?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I've noticed myself doing it so much more recently. Maybe this abundance mindset needs to chill because
new shoes,
the amount of packages arriving at
there's lots of packages that have arrived, hasn't there? Yes.
What? Did someone get me something?
No, you remember I got a special delivery last week.
Me? So
I know.
Oh my God, no, the world is not all about you, Sophie. It's my birthday soon, so I was just, thought maybe.
It's like the other day, I was like, hey, babe, are you going to work on your birthday or are you going to take the day off? She's like, why, are you going to organise a lunch for me? I'd love that. She's like,
obviously I'm going to come in.
I was just kind of scheduling some meetings, but okay, now I should organise a lunch.
I came all the way from New Zealand. We're having a birthday lunch.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There definitely are things that my younger self would panic about, but also would be super stoked that I'm finally able to do that. Danielle 2 years ago is stoked that I'm going, get the bag, babe. Jesus, give yourself a break. And that's, not to rehash what we've already talked about, but we're talking for a decade, instead of getting a taxi that was £7, I'm going to walk 8 miles. Just such an incredible thing to finally go, oh my God, get the taxi.
Yeah.
And not be filled with guilt. But even the childhood and the lessons and the scarcity and the abundance all comes into one when I'm purchasing something. So the other day I bought those loafers that you guys saw. I went into Selfridges, who will now never sponsor this podcast. I went into Selfridges, tried them on, was like, yep, cool, a couple of £100, sweet. Walked out of Selfridges. I'm not even out of the building yet, and I've bought them online for £200 less.
Oh my God, amazing.
Because why would I pay for that? You don't have to sacrifice a lot of things. Just do a little bit of research and make your money go further. You don't have to then be without something. You can find something that fits within your budget, it's the exact same thing, and still have that dopamine hit and the thing that you actually needed.
I feel like we could talk to you for hours and hours, and I'm just aware of the fact that you're actually not going anywhere and we can get you back in for another podcast. So maybe we just hit pause and say thank you for sharing. And
Welcome.
Yeah, it's so nice to have someone else to share. Vic and I know each other's money stories inside out.
Gosh, I cannot say or do anything without Sophie being like, oh, that's a good content piece. We were the other day and I was like.
You were talking about your dog's
I was talking about
teeth.
Of Invisalign.
And I remember thinking, because we're in the investing club, for anyone that isn't a part of that yet, it's basically we talk about individual stocks and investment ideas, and one of them was to do with pets. And Vic was talking about the stock and saying, it's such a massive movement, everyone spends so much money on their pet. And I found myself sitting in the bath 2 days later thinking about Miso's crooked teeth, thinking, I wonder if Vic would spend money on Invisalign for her dog. I wonder at what point she
100%.
My brain just works like that.
Would not.
I just don't
there would
believe
be
you.
people, I don't even know if there's Invisalign for dog. There probably is, but I would never. I'm sorry, Miso. You're perfect where
You did
are,
spend
but
$600 on a dog bed. I know.
Dani, thank you for being on the podcast.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
We love having you as part of the team. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts after listening to this episode, you can either comment on Spotify, if there's anything you want to share, or send us a message on Instagram. Or even actually we've got our voice notes now, which is
SpeakPipe.
But she decided to call it the Curve Hotline.
Love it.
So if you've got anything, we'll put the
Sounds a bit sexy.
Yeah.
We are sexy.
We are. Thank
Yeah,
you. We
yeah.
are sexy.
Yeah.
I wish I could learn to wink like you just did and not look like a total loser.
It's kind of
can't
amazing
do-
that I can.
I can only do both eyes.
I got quite a lot of Botox a couple of weeks ago, so the fact that I can even do that is amazing.
Hey, you can't click with your third finger.
Clips with their third finger. It's the weirdest thing ever.
I did it the other day and Soph's like, whoa. And I was like, what? Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
See ya.
Cool.
Thanks for being here and bye.
And we'll all go to the office together now.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Raising the Curve. These conversations are designed to teach you everything that you need to know to be better with your money, from saving to investing to talking to your friends about your salaries.
And if you liked what you heard, we would love it if you could hit the subscribe button, please.
Yes,
or
please.
better yet, leave a review. It only
nice
takes 5
one.
seconds and it would really make our week, our year, our month.
Okay. Lots of love. See you soon.
Bye.